Rain poured like anger from the sky that night in Lagos. People ran for shelter, covering their heads with newspapers and bags. But in the middle of the chaos, one man stood frozen. He was well dressed, expensive shoes, gold watch, designer shirt, but something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, he collapsed to the ground, screaming as if invisible hands were dragging him down into the earth. His fingers clawed at the wet pavement. His eyes rolled back. People gathered quickly, forming a curious circle around him, but no one dared step closer. There was something unnatural about the way he moved. Then lightning flashed across the dark sky, illuminating everything for just 1 second. And in that brief moment of light, people saw it clearly. The man lying on the ground had no shadow. The crowd gasped and scattered in terror. What kind of person has no shadow? But this man was not always like this. 6 months ago, his name was Tund, and he was nobody special. Just another struggling young man in Lagos, trying and failing every single day. He sat in a cramped office waiting room, sweating through his faded shirt, clutching a worn folder containing his certificates. This was his 5th job interview that month. The others had all ended the same way: polite rejections, fake smiles, empty promises to call you back. When his name was finally called, he walked in nervously. The interview lasted 7 minutes. The man across the table barely looked at his papers. "We'll let you know," he said coldly. Tund nodded and left quietly, knowing the truth. Outside, his phone buzzed. 12 unread messages. All from people he owed money. All threatening. All angry. He stared at the screen, his chest tight with shame. The worst moment came 2 days later. Tund was standing at a busy roadside junction, trying to meet a potential client who never showed up. While he waited, a loud voice cut through the noise of the street. "Tund. Oh me, oh woe me." A short, aggressive man pushed through the crowd, pointing at him. It was one of his creditors. People stopped to watch. The man shouted louder, calling Tund a thief, a liar, a useless fool who borrowed money and ran away. Tund tried to explain quietly, but the man wouldn't stop. He grabbed Tund's shirt, shook him, humiliated him publicly. People laughed. Some recorded videos on their phones. Tund stood there, frozen, his face burning with shame. When the man finally left, Tund walked away slowly, his head down, fists clenched. He whispered under his breath, "I'm tired of this life." From that day, something changed inside Tund. He stopped trying the normal way. CV drops, interviews, networking, all of it felt useless now. Instead, he began watching. Watching the men who drove past in expensive cars. Watching the ones who never seemed to struggle. Watching the ones who had money but no clear job. How did they do it? He started asking questions in low voices at bars and street corners. How can someone make money fast? Most people ignored him. Others laughed. But a few leaned in close and whispered about shortcuts, about connections, about places where real money was made. One name kept coming up, a location on the outskirts of the city where desperate men went and came back changed. "But don't go there," someone warned him seriously. "People who go there are never the same." Tund nodded. But inside, curiosity was already eating him alive. A week later, Tund met a man named Kazim at a small beer parlor. Kazim was street smart, loud, and always had money in his pocket. Tund bought him a drink and asked carefully, "That place people talk about, where you can get real money, is it real?" Kazim's face changed. He stopped smiling. "You don't want to know about that place." "I'm just asking," Tund pressed. Kazim leaned back, shaking his head. "I know 3 people who went there. All of them got rich overnight. But all of them changed. Their eyes became cold. Their smiles felt wrong. One of them doesn't even come out during the day anymore." He stared hard at Tund. "Money is good, but some prices are too high." Tund thanked him and left. But Kazim's warning didn't scare him. Instead, it made him more curious. That night, Tund made his decision. He would go. Late at night, Tund arrived at the location. It was a part of Lagos he had never seen before. Too quiet, too empty, too still. No streetlights. No noise. Just silence that felt heavy like a blanket pressing down on him. The air smelled strange, like burnt wood mixed with something sweet and rotten. Tund's heart pounded as he walked slowly down the dark path. His phone had no signal here. He was completely alone. Or so he thought. Suddenly, a voice spoke behind him, calm and cold. "You came." Tund spun around, his breath catching in his throat. A man stood there in the shadows, perfectly still. Tund hadn't heard him approach. Hadn't heard footsteps. Nothing. The man stepped forward slightly, just enough for the faint moonlight to touch his face. His expression was blank. Empty. "I've been waiting," the man said. The stranger's eyes were the most unsettling thing about him. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just stared, as if looking through Tund instead of at him. "Who are you?" Tund asked, his voice shaking. The man smiled faintly. "That doesn't matter. What matters is why you're here." Tund tried to speak, but the man raised a hand. "You're drowning in debt. You've been rejected 12 times this month. Your landlord is about to throw you out. Your friends avoid your calls. Your family is ashamed of you." Tund's blood ran cold. "How do you?" "I know everything," the man interrupted. "I know you're not here for advice. You're not here for a job. You're here because you're tired of suffering." Tund nodded slowly, unable to deny it. The stranger's smile widened slightly. "You don't want money, Tund. You want escape." And those words hit deeper than anything Tund had ever heard. The stranger began walking in a slow circle around Tund, his hands behind his back. "I can give you wealth beyond anything you've imagined. Money that never runs out. Doors that open without knocking. Respect without begging. Everything you've ever wanted." Tund's heart raced. "What's the price?" The man stopped walking and looked at him directly. "Your shadow." Tund blinked. "My shadow?" "Yes," the stranger said calmly. "Give me your shadow, and everything changes immediately." Tund laughed nervously. It sounded like a joke. Like madness. "That's impossible. Shadows aren't real things you can just..." The stranger raised one finger. "Let me show you." He stepped under a dim light hanging from a nearby tree. His body cast a shadow on the ground, clear and dark. Then, slowly, impossibly, the shadow began to peel away. It lifted from the ground like paper being pulled from a surface. Tund's knees went weak. This was real. The shadow hovered in the air for a moment, detached completely from the stranger's body. It moved independently, twisting, stretching, alive. Tund stumbled backward, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't science. This was something else entirely. The stranger allowed the shadow to float for a few more seconds, then with a simple gesture, it snapped back into place beneath his feet. He looked at Tund with that same blank expression. "This is real," he said. "And this is the deal. Your shadow in exchange for the life you want." Tund's throat was dry. His hands were shaking. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to run, to leave, to forget this place. But desperation is stronger than reason. He thought about the debts, the shame, the endless rejection, the laughter. "If I do this," Tund whispered, "how soon does it start?" The stranger smiled. "Immediately." Tund stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the ground, at his own shadow stretching faintly in the dim light. His mind raced through every other option he had tried. Every door that had closed. Every person who had turned their back. What did he have left to lose? He looked up at the stranger, his voice barely steady. "I'll do it." The stranger didn't react with excitement or satisfaction. He simply nodded once, as if he had known all along. Good. We begin now. There was no contract to sign. No papers. No witnesses. Just the two of them in the dark. The stranger gestured for Tund to step into the center of a small clearing. Tund obeyed, his legs moving on their own. The stranger began drawing symbols on the ground with his finger, strange markings that glowed faintly. Tund's heartbeat thundered in his ears. There was no turning back now. The stranger began to chant in a language Tund didn't recognize. The words felt ancient, heavy, wrong. The air grew colder. The darkness around them seemed to move, pressing closer. Tund looked down and gasped. His shadow was stretching. Not naturally, unnaturally. It grew longer, darker, thicker, as if something was pulling it from underneath. Panic flooded through him. "Wait," he tried to say, but his voice wouldn't come out. The shadow continued to stretch, twisting like something alive trying to escape. Then the pain hit. A sharp, tearing sensation deep inside his chest, like something was being ripped out of him. Tund screamed. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest, his whole body shaking violently. The shadow pulled further and further away, detaching inch by inch. And then, with one final yank, it separated completely. Silence. Tund collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, his vision blurred. Everything went quiet. The chanting stopped. The darkness stopped moving. Tund lay on the ground, panting, his body drenched in sweat. Slowly, he pushed himself up onto his knees and looked down. Where his shadow should have been, there was nothing. Just empty ground beneath him, even though the faint light above should have cast a shadow. It was gone. Completely gone. The stranger stood a few feet away, holding something dark and formless in his hands. Tund's shadow, now separate, now owned by someone else. The man looked at it with mild interest, then tucked it away into the folds of his coat as if it were a piece of cloth. He turned to Tund and smiled faintly. "It's done," he said. "Your new life begins now. Go home. Sleep. By morning, everything will change." Tund nodded weakly, unable to speak. He stood on shaking legs and walked away, never looking back. The next morning, Tund woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing non-stop. He groaned and grabbed it, squinting at the screen. 23 missed calls. 15 text messages. Emails flooding in. Confused, he opened the first message. It was a job offer, an executive position at a company he had never even applied to. The salary made his eyes widen. He opened another message. A business partnership offer. Then another. An investor wanted to meet him. Another message. Another opportunity. Money appeared in his bank account. Sender unknown. Tund sat up in bed, his heart pounding. This was real. Everything was happening exactly as promised. He stood up and walked to the mirror to splash water on his face. But when he looked at his reflection, something felt off. He couldn't explain it. He just felt strange. Incomplete. Empty. He shook it off and smiled. This was the beginning. Within 2 weeks, Tund's life transformed completely. He moved into a luxury apartment in Lekki. He bought a car. Sleek. Black. Expensive. He wore designer clothes that still had tags on them. People who used to ignore him now greeted him with wide smiles. Old friends who had abandoned him suddenly started calling again. "Guy, we missed you," they said. Tund smiled and played along, but inside, he felt nothing. No joy. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. One afternoon, he was walking through a shopping mall, feeling untouchable, when a small child ran past him. Suddenly, the child stopped, turned around, and stared at Tund. The boy's face twisted in fear. Then he burst into tears and ran back to his mother, screaming. The mother looked at Tund with confusion and hurried away. Tund stood frozen, disturbed. What had that child seen? Days passed, and the emptiness grew stronger. Tund threw parties, bought things, went to clubs, surrounded himself with people, but nothing made him feel anything. No excitement. No happiness. Not even anger. Just a cold, hollow numbness. He began noticing other things too. When he laughed, it sounded fake even to his own ears. When people spoke to him, their words felt distant, like he was hearing them through water. One night, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. He moved his hand. His reflection moved. But it felt delayed. Just a fraction of a second too slow. He blinked. His reflection blinked. But again, delayed. As if it wasn't fully connected to him anymore. Tund stepped closer, his face inches from the glass. He whispered, "What's happening to me?" His reflection stared back, silent. And for just a moment, Tund swore it smiled when he didn't. Tund began to change in ways he didn't recognize. He became colder, harsher, reckless. Things that used to scare him no longer did. Guilt, which used to keep him awake at night, had vanished completely. One evening, a man bumped into him at a bar and spilled his drink. The old Tund would have apologized and moved on. But this Tund grabbed the man by the collar and slammed him against the wall with shocking violence. People gasped. The man's eyes filled with fear. Tund stared at him blankly, then let go and walked away without a word. No apology. No regret. Nothing. Later that night, Tund sat in his car, staring at his hands. He had just hurt someone for no real reason. And he felt nothing. No shame. No remorse. Just emptiness. He whispered, "What am I becoming?" But deep down, he already knew. He wasn't becoming something. He was losing something. And whatever it was never coming back. That night, Tund couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling uneasy. The room was silent, but something felt wrong. He sat up slowly and looked around. Nothing unusual. Just shadows from the streetlight outside casting shapes on the walls. But then he saw it. In the corner of the room, near the wardrobe, a shadow moved. Not his. He didn't move, but the shadow shifted. Tund's heart raced. He turned on the light quickly. The shadow vanished. He sat there, breathing hard, telling himself it was just his imagination. Just tiredness. Just stress. But when he turned off the light again and lay back down, he felt it. A presence. Something standing behind him. Watching. He spun around. Nothing. But the feeling didn't leave. For the rest of the night, Tund lay awake, eyes wide open, too afraid to close them. Something was in the room with him. The shadow began appearing everywhere. In reflections. On walls. In corners of rooms. Never fully visible. Just glimpses. A shape moving when it shouldn't. A darkness deeper than it should be. Tund saw it in the rearview mirror of his car, a figure sitting in the back seat. He slammed the brakes and turned around. Nothing. He saw it in windows as he walked past buildings, a silhouette walking beside him that wasn't his own. He saw it in his apartment at night, standing at the edge of his bed, watching. Tund stopped sleeping. He started drinking. He avoided mirrors. He kept the lights on constantly. But nothing helped. The shadow was always there. And worse, it was becoming clearer. More solid. More real. One night, he stood in his living room, trembling, staring at the wall where the shadow lingered. He shouted into the empty room, "What do you want from me?" The shadow didn't respond. It just grew darker. And for the first time since the deal, Tund felt something again. Fear. Desperation took over. Tund had to find the stranger. He had to undo this. He drove back to the location where the deal was made, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He arrived at the same dark path, the same eerie silence. But when he stepped out of the car, everything looked different. The trees were the same, but the clearing was gone. The markings on the ground, gone. The spot where the stranger had stood, empty. Tund ran through the area, calling out, "I know you're here. Come out. I need to talk to you." Silence. Just the wind. He searched for hours until the sun began to rise. Nothing. As he turned to leave, exhausted and broken, a voice whispered beside his ear, so close he felt breath on his neck. "You can't undo it." Tund spun around violently. No one. Just the wind. And a chill that reached into his bones. Weeks later, Tund was sitting alone at a bar when an old man sat down next to him. The man was thin, ragged, eyes sunken deep into his face. He stared at Tund for a long moment, then spoke quietly. "You sold it, didn't you?" Tund froze. "Sold what?" The man smiled bitterly. "Your shadow." Tund's blood turned cold. "How do you?" "Because I did the same thing," the man whispered. 20 years ago." Tund grabbed his arm. "Then tell me how to reverse it. How do I get it back?" The old man shook his head slowly. "You can't. Your shadow didn't disappear, boy. It was taken. And now it lives separately. Watching you. Feeding off you." Tund's hands trembled. "What does that mean?" The man leaned closer, his voice a broken whisper. "It grows stronger the longer you live without it. And when it's strong enough." He paused, fear filling his eyes. "It replaces you." Tund's life spiraled completely out of control. He stopped going out. Stopped answering calls. Stopped pretending everything was fine. The money was still there. The success was still there. But Tund was disappearing. He would sit for hours staring at nothing, his mind blank. Then suddenly, violent thoughts would flood in. Thoughts that didn't feel like his own. Urges to hurt people. To destroy things. To do the unthinkable. He fought them at first, but they grew louder, stronger, more persistent. One night, he looked down at his hands and didn't recognize them. They felt foreign. Like they belonged to someone else. He looked in the mirror and saw his face, but it didn't feel like his face anymore. And then he saw it clearly for the first time. Standing behind him in the reflection. The shadow. Fully formed now. His exact shape. His exact height. Staring back at him with empty, hollow eyes. Tund whispered, "No." The shadow tilted its head. And smiled. Tund ran. He didn't know where, but he ran. He couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. He checked into a hotel under a fake name, locked the door, and sat on the floor with his back against the wall. But the shadow followed. It appeared in the bathroom mirror. In the window reflection. On the wall opposite him. Tund covered his face and screamed. The next day, he found the old man from the bar again. He begged him for answers. "You said it replaces me. What does that mean? What happens?" The old man looked at him with pity. "When the shadow fully forms, it doesn't just follow you anymore. It merges with you. It takes over. You stop being you." Tund shook his head violently. "No. No, that's not. Look at your feet," the man said quietly. Tund looked down. And his heart stopped. A faint outline of a shadow was forming beneath him. But it wasn't attached. It was separate. Independent. Alive. Tund found him. After weeks of searching, bribing, and following every lead, Tund finally found the stranger again. He was standing in the same dark clearing as if he had never left. Tund stormed toward him, rage and fear mixing in his chest. "Reverse it," Tund shouted. "Take your money. Take everything back. Just give me my shadow." The stranger looked at him calmly, unbothered. "You agreed to the deal." "I didn't know what it meant," Tund screamed. The stranger stepped closer, his face expressionless. "You sold your shadow, yes. But that's not all you sold." Tund's breath caught. "What are you talking about?" The stranger's eyes locked onto his. "Your shadow wasn't just a shadow, Tund. It was tied to your humanity. Your conscience. Your soul." The words hit like a hammer. And once it's separated, the stranger continued, it cannot be returned. You are no longer whole. And you never will be again. Tund fell to his knees, broken. Please, he whispered. There has to be a way. The stranger looked down at him without pity. There is no way. You made your choice. Then the stranger disappeared into the darkness, leaving Tund alone. Tund sat there for hours, staring at the ground. He felt it now. The shadow was no longer behind him. It was standing in front of him. Fully formed. Fully alive. An exact copy of himself, but wrong. Empty. Dark. It looked at him with cold, dead eyes. Then slowly, it began walking toward him. Tund tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. The shadow reached out its hand and placed it on Tund's chest. Coldness flooded through him. His vision blurred. His heartbeat slowed. And then, the shadow stepped forward, merging into him, consuming him, becoming him. Tund's scream echoed through the night. Then silence. Rain poured heavily that night in Lagos. People ran for shelter. And in the middle of the chaos, a well-dressed man collapsed to the ground, screaming, clawing at the wet pavement. People gathered, watching in horror. Lightning flashed. His body had no shadow. But then, slowly, he stopped moving. The screaming stopped. The thrashing stopped. Silence. Moments passed. Then the man stood up. Calmly. His clothes were soaked, but he didn't seem to care. His face was blank. Expressionless. Empty. He looked around at the crowd, but his eyes held nothing. No fear. No confusion. No humanity. He walked away slowly, his footsteps steady. And as he passed under a streetlight, people saw it clearly. He cast a shadow now. A perfect, dark shadow. But if anyone had looked closely, they would have noticed something terrifying. The shadow moved just a fraction too slow. As if it was leading him. Not following.